Hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on the top 5 ways to reduce incident volume with AI and analytics. My name is Amit Shah and I lead product marketing here at Numerify. Before we dive into this very exciting topic, I first wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. The first one is that this webinar is live and is being recorded. A link will be sent out within the next couple of days so that you can refer to it or share it with your colleagues. So feel free to share it if you like the content, and don't worry about taking notes. You'll have the ability to go back to anything you found interesting. The second one, all recorded Numerify webinars like this one in the next few days can be found on numerify.com under the Resources tab. And the third and possibly the most important thing, please feel free to ask a question at any time. You will see the Q&A panel at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question, apologize in advance, but we will attempt to answer it offline after the webinar. So with that, let's dive into the presentation. So welcome to today's webinar on the top 5 incident reduction best practices driven by AI and analytics. My name is Amit Shah, and I'll be your host today. Every IT organization would like to reduce the number of incidents that they experience. The rewards for achieving this are substantial and fairly obvious to most of you who've dialed into this call. Fewer business disruptions, lower IT costs, and the ability to concentrate talent on growth and innovation. However, with the growth and in the number and complexity of services, where do you get started? That's where analytics can help. So keeping that in mind, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jim Hennigan from Numerify. As part of the solution team, Jim has been working with Numerify's customers over the past few years to identify opportunities to reduce incident volume and realize a quick and impactful ROI. So without further ado, Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. I appreciate it, and thank you everyone for joining me today. Again, I am Jim Hennigan. I've been with Numerify a couple of years now, working with Fortune 500 companies on top-level objectives, and it seems time and time again, the one that we come back to is incident reduction. And it's easy to see why, because if you talk about today and just where IT fits in an organization, systems are not getting more complex. Processes are not getting simpler. We're not getting less data, right? So there's just more and more incidents being created, and what happens is you get a lot of noise out there. So organizations are turning to us to really help them address this problem head on. And a big reason for that is because the outcomes we can drive just by simply reducing your incidents. So, first and foremost, delighting your customers. Again, IT is getting very complex, and what you want to do is move from talking about your IT organization and people thinking of the help desk and thinking about putting in incidents, and really drive the perspective of IT as an innovation center within your business. And part of that is, again, as Amit had just said, freeing up your talent from strictly spending their time on keeping the lights on activities, keeping the business running. Of course, that has to be done, but freeing their time up so they can really kind of focus on those innovation items, right, on the growth and the transformation of your business. And of course, incidents, the reduction of incidents and shifting that work left, right, reducing your MTTR, those are directly tied to costs, right, and the cost cutting that you get from an effort like this. So, because of all this, and really this is something that is at the forefront of many CIOs' minds. But the problem is it's very complex. It's not something you can tackle overnight. Every customer is different. Every organization has their own challenges, but these are really the top challenges, right? So they just don't know where to begin. It just seems like there's too many balls in the air. You don't really know where to start. Where's the low-hanging fruit, right? And we'll show you how to identify that. Lack of root cause insights. So, addressing the incidents, addressing the business pain, but never really taking the step back and understanding, where is that pain originating, and tackling it at the root cause level. We'll also show you how we identify that. False positives, so time and time again, you'll see incidents come through for particular parts of the business or for particularly grumpy applications. But again, they're not really properly identified or properly categorized, and they just kind of fall into these buckets where they're not being addressed head on. And lastly, organizational inertia. So there's so many processes in place. Your organization might be very complex just from a hierarchy standpoint, and technology is moving so fast these days that it's really hard to take that step back and to make sure your processes are aligned with that technology, and aligned with your business objectives. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So these are the top 5 best practices we're going to talk about today. In a second, we'll talk about establishing accountability and rewards, practicing strategic problem management. So again, getting beyond just managing your incidents and tying that business pain back to the other processes in that purview, right? And using that and driving that to create a better service overall for your organization. Mining your data for root cause. So if you don't have data telling you the whole story about what is happening in your organization and where these incidents are occurring, you're not going to be able to get to that business pain. And we'll show you a few different ways and a few different tools where we address this, regardless of how you feel your data is situated today. Stop chasing your tail. That really ties back to what I just spoke of around organizational inertia, and just kind of head down, solving incidents, pushing through the fog to understand, where should we really be spending our time to ensure we're delivering the best value for the business. I will show you what we do there as well. And lastly, preventing incidents caused by change. This is a very hot button topic right now with a lot of folks that I talk to. I will show you one of the ways that we are leveraging AI and ML to predict potential failures and changes and risks as well. So our first best practice, accountability, rewards, and ROI. So really what this is tied to is establishing a culture around this objective that you're trying to drive and making sure you have a unified front. So this is very much less about the data and more about the organization and how you define the metrics that you want to measure. I've gone into accounts and talked to folks where we can bring up a very standard KPI such as MTTR, and depending on who you talk to in the organization, it means something different to them, right? So mean time to resolve, it should be when an incident is open to when it was closed potentially. But if you don't really have that defined very properly and have sign-in from everyone from the CIO down, you have trouble kind of creating this culture and talking the same language and understanding really what it is you're trying to do. And the key to success there is what we call the system of intelligence, right? And it's going to enable you to define these KPIs and these metrics centrally and focus on them, and ensure everyone's talking the same language and you're all, again, facing the same way and marching towards the same goal. Assigning accountability. So it's important that these buckets of data you have don't exist in silos. It's important that they are accessible to everyone in the organization. So the CIO is looking at some of those top level KPIs and understanding how you're trending overall. Well, you should be looking at the same types of KPIs, drilling into maybe your area of the business, your business service, and ensuring that you are also in lockstep there as well. So, part of that is tying maybe some of this data back to CI owners, creating hierarchies around your organization within your ITSM system of record today. Sometimes folks don't really have that built out, and that's really one of the areas we help address as well. Setting targets and rewards, so this is important too. So making sure that you're not just talking, we want to reduce incident volumes. Well, what does that mean? Do we have a percentage goal? Do we have a number goal? What are our dates objectives? And make sure everyone knows where their team stands on these goals and how they stand compared to the rest of the organization, right? So we call it a little bit of fame or shame. You want to make sure your organization isn't on the tail end of this very important objective. But also this helps as well because if you're measuring these teams compared to other teams, you could look at maybe the top 2 or 3 business areas, and if you see they're doing well, much better than the rest of the organization, do you have the ability to ask, interrogate your data and ask the questions to understand what are they doing differently that's helping them achieve their success? And can we replicate that, to maybe some of these other areas as well? So setting those targets is very important. And lastly, enabling success. So you want to make sure that your teams have the tools, that they can use to understand exactly where they are, where they need to be, and as they have questions about their data or their processes, they have a suite of tools to be able to address incident reduction head on. So when we talk about the actual analysis or the dashboards that we use to leverage that, it'd be something like this. So we call this a walk the floor dashboard, something that your leadership would leverage to kind of look into maybe once a day, once a week to understand, where is my organization stand, from the KPIs I want to address, and also from these top level objectives. So in this case, incident reduction. So part of this is understanding how we're trending over time, but also if you look at the bottom here, I apologize if that's a little blurry, forward-facing metrics as well. So understanding, what's coming down the pipe in the next week, next month, and how could that possibly affect these KPIs? It's important that anything you're measuring here today is something that you can get to the point where it's actionable, right? So KPIs in a vacuum don't really mean anything, but if you're able to take that and understand, who you have to talk to in the business or the direction or the action you have to take, that's when it becomes really powerful. So it's important to ensure that the metrics you're measuring, drive that to completion. Moving on, number 2 is practicing strategic problem management. So this is very important, and this is a struggle we see with a lot of folks that we talk to. So when we talk about strategic problem management, it means prioritizing your resources. Everyone is so busy today, but if you can really help them focus in on the problem areas where they're going to have the biggest impact on incident volume, that's what you want to be able to do. So part of that is we'll take a look at historical data sets and understand where's that low-hanging fruit, where maybe are we lacking in the problem management process, or we're not doing it at all, and where can we use problem management to help drive the incident volume down the quickest. And so part of that is looking at, I'll show you a dashboard, it's called Top Incident Drivers, where you look at the overall incident volume and finding those hotspots, right? Shining a light on maybe particular business services or assignment groups or areas where we're seeing a uptick in incidents, and again, driving your problem process. So part of that as well is also identifying incidents maybe that are closed as unsolved, or the closure code is a little ambiguous, or incidents that seem to be repeating and being solved very quickly. These are, again, the areas you can tackle quickly and get results right away. So this is the type of analysis we would do here to identify maybe where your problem management group should be, identifying these areas. So looking holistically at your incidents over the past year, grouping them into buckets by many different criteria. Contact type here we have. So it's important to understand, let's maybe pull away from some of the noise. So if you have a lot of automated tickets that are coming in, going through the process, being solved, let's not look at those. Let's look at user-generated tickets, ensure that they're being, submitted properly, categorized properly, and closed properly, and making sure that they're tied to problems quickly and accurately. And we'll show you part of that as well. Number 3, so we talk about mining your data for root cause. Now, so this best practice is about making the most of the data that you have today. Many times people seem to struggle with this because they think their data isn't ready for this type of analysis. But really that's not the case. It's just a matter of understanding where your data lies. Most often it's in silos, or it's tribal information that hasn't necessarily been captured yet. But nonetheless, you're able to pull it together. You just have to understand how and just get to it. And part of that is combining these related data sets for deeper insights. So we can't just, I mentioned this before, we can't just look at incidents and think we're going to get a large volume of these incidents reduced. It's a matter of taking your incidents, tying it together with areas that might be a little harder to correlate today. So it might be as simple as problem, and change and CI information, but it might be other data sets as well that would help drive this initiative. And it gives you that true picture, and that understanding that business impact that's happening from these incidents. Some other areas, leveraging machine learning. So I did touch on that a little bit earlier. So we use a method called incident clustering to help drive towards root cause analysis, and then use that to push onto the data set of incidents that are coming down the pipe and help drive them either to bolster your problem management process or to help create a playbook for your agents to identify where those incidents truly belong. Again, that's a little bit more shifting work left than potentially reducing these incidents. And lastly, text analytics. This is very important because a lot of folks aren't really doing this right now. We have a lot of structured data. We have a lot of data that's kind of hidden in these free-form text fields as well. So when we talk about short descriptions and work notes, there's a lot to be deciphered from there. There's a lot of value we can drive when we're talking about incident reduction. We'll show you how we leverage that as well. So again, I spoke about combining these related data sets. So it's important to take the incident data you have today and move away from operational reporting, and get deeper into strategic analysis. And part of that, it has to come from the data. So not reporting out of these silos you see on the screen here, but pulling this all together into a data warehouse where the data is managed and correlated in a way where now you can pull these different areas together and again, tell that whole story, of the incident. Not just the incident was created, but really what caused it. Are there trends maybe in your software development data that are, pushing production, impacting defects into your environments? Or people and team information that might not necessarily be part of your general incident data set. Understanding, that are your vendors properly aligned to the processes of your business as well, or are there certain groups that are performing maybe not as well as others? Application performance data as well is important, especially when you're talking about change failure. I have many organizations that they talk about having a low change failure rate, but then when we really get into the deep dive of the data, we're finding that while you might not have a change really flagged as failed, if you look at some of the application data that's tied to the CI, that change was part of, you see a severe impact to the users from a degradation of service or maybe even the availability of the application, but it's not necessarily tied directly to the change. So these are all the ways that just having all this data tied together really helps you, push forward with incident reduction. When we're talking about machine learning, we use incident clustering. So real high level, what this means is, again, we're preventing incidents, but also improving the handling of incidents that seem to happen over and over again. And ultimately, we're trying to determine root causes. So part of what this means is we use topic-based machine learning modeling based upon all of your historical incidents that you may have today. So not just looking at the data that's in tables, right, but pulling in log data as well as that unstructured data, keywords and key phrases. And what this model does is it will spit out topics that are tied to potential root causes. And now what we do is it's iterative, so we go back with our stakeholders and we discuss these potential root causes we think we found. And we determine the ones that, in fact, are root causes, the ones that aren't, and we push it back through the model. And in the end, after this iterative process, what you get is this framework you can use now to drive this smarter problem management. So now you have these large buckets of root causes that these incidents are falling into that aren't tied necessarily to root causes that are specifically defined within your incident data, right? It's based upon, again, that unstructured data that you have. So again, you have these problem management folks that their time is very precious. Make sure that you're pointing them in the right direction in the areas that are going to drive the most value the quickest. And that's what this does here. The other way that this works is we get this playbook now, this framework where you have these potential root causes based upon the historical workload. Well, you push that up against the intake of incidents that you have today. So what that means is as incidents are coming in, the model will say, there's a very good chance that this incident is tied to this root cause. The data we're seeing in the incident from the categorization may not reflect that, but based upon our historical workload, this is what we're seeing. So again, this is helping you kind of shift your work left, and reduce that time to triage and that time to resolve. And when we talk about further diving down into text analytics, there's many ways that we leverage this. This is one specific customer example. So, looking at these incidents from a keyword perspective. So, which keywords are appearing the most often in these incidents in either the work notes or the short descriptions, and then attacking it from that angle. So, what you're seeing here is we have highlighted the keyword WebEx, and what we're finding is that incidents coming through with the keyword WebEx are solved very quickly, and they're very, very rarely escalated, which seem to be an outlier compared to many of these other keywords. Drilling into that, we can understand the close code and the subcategories that these incidents are falling into. But then most importantly, again, actionable items are always what you have to drive through here with your data. And what we found is that half of all these WebEx tickets were informational. So just people asking questions and trying to get some information about WebEx. And were there knowledge-based articles tied to that? Maybe there were, maybe there weren't. But now you have that knowledge, you have the ability to take that action on that, understanding. Do we need to train our intake folks properly? Do we need to make people aware that there's these knowledge-based articles out of there? Again, pushing these incidents into the self-service bucket is a good way to move them off of your plate and to cut through a lot of this noise. It's just one way that we apply text analytics to incidents. Number 4, stop chasing your tail. So this picture here, very familiar. This was me in a previous life as a help desk agent. Week in, week out, we get the same applications failing. We get the same incidents from the same people. It seemed like we knew how to solve them. We'd solve them, we'd move on. But very rarely did we really stop and kind of ask ourselves, well, why is this always occurring? What are we doing to address this? Again, getting back to tying it back to the problem process and really getting into the root cause identification, because without that, you're just chasing your tail. So it's not necessarily about reducing incidents per se, but this is more about just, again, shifting work left. So reducing the number of touches that these incidents are taking, understanding where process inefficiencies are, right? Process efficiency is a huge use case for us. Freeing up your resources so that they can address these permanent fixes, so they don't have their heads down and going over and over again with these same incidents. And part of that too, again, I mentioned shifting these incidents that shouldn't really be tied as incidents into these other buckets. So either auto-generated areas or standard requests, and moving away from these duplicate incidents coming over and over again. And part of the way we do that, again, is having a data warehouse, having an analytical platform built for the business of IT, and having that data at the ready. So this is a very real use case that I did for a customer where an application owner came to us and they said, I know that a lot of my folks are spending time on these tickets that they shouldn't be. These tickets are supposed to belong to group X, Y, and Z. However, I don't have the visibility to identify who's doing it, how often they're doing it. I don't really have the ability to make my case. So we built what you see here on the screen, so ticket throughput. What this does is it gives these application owners the ability to look at their assignment groups and understand the general KPIs across that particular month, but this is really what they were looking for. So now they can see month over month, what percentage of time are we actively working on tickets that we didn't resolve that went to other groups. And so you can see here on the last month we recorded this, almost 25% of their time was spent on these tickets they shouldn't have been managing in the first place. So this was a good story they were able to tell, right? The ability to drill into these month over month, see the individual incidents, see how many touches they had, see how much time was spent on those incidents. But then furthermore, understand, and I know this is messy here, but once drilling into the month and the particular incident, seeing the path this incident took. So at an individual level, how many people touched the incident, which groups touched the incident, as you can see on the right-hand side here. But then being able to aggregate that up and understand, here are the groups that are pushing tickets to us most often that we don't resolve. Here's the groups that we're pushing tickets out to the most often that we aren't really expecting, right? And seeing the volumes there. So now you have the ability to take these conversations to these folks and understand, where are these process inefficiencies coming from? How do we address it? And because of this analysis, we were able to fix this problem for them. So now I think they're down to about 10% as far as tickets that get misrouted to this group. Lastly, preventing incidents caused by change. So this is another way where we leverage machine learning to get ahead of failed changes. So failed changes that we see are very, very often the cause of many incidents over and over again at our customer sites. And detecting those ahead of time has proven to be very, very fruitful for them. So what we've done here, again, is applied machine learning. So what we do is we pull in all of their historical change information, push that through our model, and then what you get is a dashboard like you'd see here. So identifying all the top risk drivers. I think we have 100 to 150 risk drivers right now that we go through, not just individually, but combinations of those as well. So it's very easy to go and look through your historical change information and say, these groups are more likely to submit failed changes based upon their record, right? But what's hard to see is changes that are submitted the third Friday of every month and then reassigned 2 times tend to fail 300% more. These are the types of insights that we're driving, and these are the type of risk predictions that our customers are leveraging today. So this type of dashboard here is something that your change advisory board would sit down with every week and take a look day over day and understand, okay, what's our change volume for this week? Which days are at a higher risk? And then the ability to click into that day, see all the particular changes for that day, understanding what the risk is, not from the risk that's identified on the particular change record, but the risk that we've identified by applying this machine learning model. And then drilling into that particular change and understanding now what those top drivers are here. So we have 8 for this particular change, and understanding, okay, this particular group is failing more often, or there's pre-prod defects for this particular CI more often. And that combination of that two has put this in the high risk impact bucket. So now you can take action by, having conversations with that group to make sure that they're properly aligned, or also just kind of looking at, days where you have higher risk, right? So maybe having, 2 to 3 high-risk changes in one day is going to cause the rest of them to be more high risk as well if they're tied to particular CIs. Right? These are the types of insights that we're driving. And then on top of that now, having the analysis to be able to look holistically at the top risk drivers for the organization and then address those. And of course, since this is an iterative model that we've produced, now as you're addressing these risks to the organization, the model changes, right, and identifies new risks. And again, being able to pull in additional data sets as well is very helpful. So not just looking at your historical incident records, but pulling in software development data, maybe some of your test coverage information, and making sure that, if you're not at 100% test coverage, what type of risk does that have to that particular change? Again, looking at all that historical information, that's all factored into the model. Even going down on the other side into the run segment and looking at APM data. So, seeing that there's performance degradation against particular changes in the past, or there are application errors that are being thrown from changes for particular CIs or for particular applications, that can all get factored into this. It really helps you get ahead of these change failures. So these are the top 5 we have, and they're all very unique, and they are somewhat complex, but they aren't unattainable. And the way that we get to it is what we call the system of intelligence approach. So, it's about ensuring that you have, data to back up this type of analysis, and you have it, at the ready, and you have this suite of analytical tools to allow you to really address your incident volume and your incident workload in all these key areas, right? So having visibility into all of your data. So we talked about this earlier. Does leadership understand, exactly where they are today, from your incident reduction objective? That's great. Are the folks on the ground, the assignment group leaders, are they looking at the same data? Do they understand, where they need to adjust to make sure that they're hitting their goals and their targets? And if they have questions from that data, right, investigation. So when you have these types of reports, many times you just get more questions out of them rather than answers. Well, do you have that data at the ready? Do you have the ability to drill down into, your different systems of record and get to the data that's not necessarily available to you today? That's extremely important. Correlation. So again, understanding, where does incident sit with all these other points of information. So it's not just problem and change, right? There's very deep links to other segments of run data, such as your APM data, your software development data that's sitting inside of maybe Jira or Team Foundation server, all the way back to the project and portfolio management, and the process information as well. This can all be correlated, and this all can be leveraged to drive initiatives such as this. And of course, last but obviously not least, is prediction. So leveraging best in class in AI and machine learning. This is something we're constantly working on. This is very important, to everyone we talk to, and it's going to be at the forefront of analytics for the foreseeable future. And what we're addressing with those types of solutions is the challenges that we talked about today. So you have all these organizational leaders. Are they measuring all of the same items? Are they all driving towards the same goal? They may all have different reports, but many times those are very segmented out, and they don't really have the ability to tie that together. And you have this huge technology stack today as well, right? You have this great fragmentation that occurred when we all moved to the cloud, and it's not getting any simpler. So do you have the ability to tie all these points together in a way that really drives this level of innovation? So we do that today, which again, we're coined as the system to intelligence, in this full stack application. So, building out pre-built adapters for all these different systems of record, and being able to automate the stacks you have here as well. So, pre-built ETL, pre-built data models that are agnostic to the systems of record. So, like I said, everything's moving very fast today. You don't want data models that are tied to a very specific product, because you could have another product come in from another business line that you want to tie this data together. Well, you need to have data models that support that. And of course, the machine learning is very important as well. You need to have the ability to adjust as you move through this. And of course, being able to bubble this all up, and deliver it to the rest of the organization, and to not do it on your own. So, many times this is something that can be delivered as a service in a matter of weeks. And this is something, if you think about, this is very complex doing it in-house. You have to touch on a lot of folks, data scientists, you have ETL specialists. We have this all packaged up and ready to go. I think it's very important. So in summary, these are the 5 best practices, right? So we talked about these thoroughly. Establishing that accountability, creating that culture that's driving towards these objectives, specifically incident reduction. If you don't have buy-in from your C-suite, it's going to be very hard to understand what you're driving towards in the first place. Practicing strategic problem management, again, making sure that your folks are not just focusing on closing out incidents, but understanding where the incidents are coming from, and building that into the DNA of your organization. Mining your data for root cause. So data within tables is just not enough today. So it's a matter of understanding all the unstructured data you have at the ready, and leveraging machine learning and AI as well to help you get to those root cause areas. Stop chasing your tail. Again, let's take a step back and breathe, and not just keep trudging through and solving the same incident over and over and over again. And lastly, of course, leveraging AI and ML to help prevent incidents that are caused by change. So that's all I have for you today. So I will open it up to questions now.
Thanks, Jim. So this is Amit, your host for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. All questions are good questions. If you have a question, then there's a good chance that someone else in the audience had it as well. So feel free to ask any question you might have. While we're waiting, we had a few questions come in throughout the presentation, so we'll get started with those. And this first question is from Brian. So, Jim, if you had to pick one place to get started on incident reduction, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that if we remember the dashboard I showed around problem management, let's just take a step back and let's not look at the whole incident workload. Let's understand, what's important to your organization. Do you have critical applications? Do you have critical assignment groups or areas? Break it down. We'll start there. And then from there, I would say definitely getting into the root cause areas is very important. So looking at that unstructured data, starting to apply these machine learning models, you'd be surprised how quickly you get to some very fruitful results.
Thanks, Jim. Our next question is from Tim. So our data is in pretty bad shape, lots of missing information, and we have a hard time categorizing incidents. Now, how would you recommend fixing our data so that we can do these types of things?
Yeah, great question. And that's, we hear that all the time. I will say no one has perfect data. Very rarely do people have great data. So we're very, adept at tackling this challenge. I would say many times, again, talking about text analytics is huge. So, regardless of, having maybe complete structured data, there are going to be notes, there are going to be short descriptions. You can garner a lot of insight just from leveraging that information as well. So many times we'll start there. And then in tandem, we will also kind of launch a data maturity effort where we help identify, hey, here's the areas where your data is the weakest, and here's the areas where we think your data will be best, right, to complete. And then we'll manage that process and we'll measure that from there as well. So we definitely have a lot of ways we address that issue.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. So our next question is from Kevin. So in your experience, how widespread is the adoption of AI/ML techniques in solving problems like this? The IT services department in our company doesn't really have access to data scientists.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to rewind here. So just talking about how this stack works. So specifically when you're talking about having data scientists and building this yourself, building out data models and building out machine learning and AI capabilities is not trivial. It's something everyone wants today. But yeah, it's something that we really kind of bring to the forefront, and it's nice too because it grows organically. So every time we deploy, one of these types of use cases for a client, that's something that can be leveraged for other customers as well. So it's something that some of our customers are trying to tackle in-house, but they're finding very quickly that it just doesn't make sense. There's folks out there that are more adept at it. They can do it cheaper. They can do it faster. So that's what I'd say to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. So we have time for one more question. This question is from Tom. So how do you get started with Numerify? All this sounds pretty complicated. Do you offer any kind of pilots around my data that could help me get started?
Absolutely, and that's where we'd recommend starting. So, it's important to sit down with your organization and understanding, what are your top objectives. So it might be incident reduction. It might be something like change failure prediction. We do a lot of work around vendor governance as well. So first, identifying that I think is important, and then understanding where your data resides. Many times we can do a one-time extract of your data, kind of show it back to you, and see what story it tells, right? Driving towards those objectives. Again, it's very important that we're not just throwing reports at you, that we're driving action, right? That you can take back to the business and drive that business value. And our pilot program that we have is the easiest way and the fastest way to do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jim, for a very interesting presentation. Thank you, everyone who joined us, and especially thank you to all the folks that asked all these interesting and great questions. It's what made it really fun for all of us. We look forward to seeing you in future webinars. If you have any further questions about this topic or any other topic that you see on our website, please feel free to reach out to either Jim or myself, and we'll make sure to put you in touch with the right person to answer your question. Thanks everyone again, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.